This mausoleum was built by Richard Deloney Bowling Taylor for his wife, Sarah Jane Billups. She is the daughter of Colonel John Billups and his wife, Ann Abbott. And she was only 28 years old when she died, and from the family letters, I am guessing that she died of breast cancer. She was survived by one daughter, Susan, and Susan is buried right here at my feet. Richard's heart was broken when he lost his wife, so he had Ross Crane, who was an agent for J. Baird in Pennsylvania, to order this Carrara marble mausoleum that was crafted for him in Italy. And by the time she died in April of 1860, 1 year before the Civil War began. But by the time this was received in Athens and erected here, the war had begun and Confederate currency was in use. So Richard Deloney Bowling Taylor paid for this in Confederate currency. A couple of years after her death, he remarried, and he and his second wife had a child, and then within a few months he died. And his second wife became his executrix. When the war ended in 1856, the company in Philadelphia came back on him and said, on the estate, and said, we were paid in Confederate money. We want U.S. greenbacks. So the second wife got to pay a second time for the first wife's monument. The second wife is not buried here. She chose to go back to her family lot in the Milledgeville Cemetery, which is Memory Hill. But Richard Deloney Bowling Taylor is buried here, as was a visiting woman during the Civil War, that it was not convenient to transport her body back where she was from, and she is still visiting in Athens in this mausoleum. This mausoleum once had a female figure under the cupola of it, and there were other figures going up towards the top, but it has been a favorite spot for vandals to do target practice. So we have lost a lot of its original beauty, and it had a lovely little door right around here. And Mrs. Tate and Dean Tate, Mrs. Tate is a descendant of the Taylors, and she and Dean Tate intended to be buried inside the mausoleum, but when they tried to get in the door, the floor had buckled because this lot was once surrounded by many magnolia trees, and the roots had grown up under the mausoleum and buckled the floor so that you couldn't open the door. So Dean Tate is buried on the other side of the mausoleum and Mrs. Tate beside him. But somebody broke into that door a few years ago, and there was no way to mend the door, and in order to keep anybody else from breaching this again, it was filled up with material so that no one could enter it, and then a new piece of marble sealed the doorway.